Hi, everybody, and welcome to Matrix Live Season 9, Episode 37. At some point, we will reach Season 10, but not today. I thought that I would record Matrix Live because we don't have anybody else queued up this week, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to give a brief sneak peek at the fun on the horizon next month, with hopefully getting Matrix 2.0 ready to a point where we can actually say that we have stable implementations and that the MSCs are ready to get FCP'd and merged into the spec. So we're really at the sort of final stages here of plugging it all together on the Matrix core team. And the three main areas where stuff is happening is, first of all, sliding sync, just for a change. So in case you've been living under a rock or on top of a very tall pillar somewhere in Myanmar, sliding sync is where you get instant login, instant sync, and instant launch on the app by only syncing the data that is really needed in order to get things as snappy and responsive as possible. Now, historically, this has been done using the sliding sync proxy, a much loved and hated shim that exists between your home server and your next-gen client in order to accelerate the sync process. But over the last couple of months, Eric Eastwood has been doing amazing work going and implementing native sliding sync into Python in Synapse, and I've been using it as my main sync protocol for the last couple of weeks. And whilst there are handful of issues left in general, it's working really, really well, at least as well as the proxy-based sliding sync. So this is exciting times. You'll be able to get rid of all the proxies. Anybody on Synapse will be able to just natively get their instant login sync and launch, and hopefully the resulting protocol, which is being dubbed simplified sliding sync. First of all, we'll get an MSC real soon now. I think we're on the final stages of basically iterating on it whilst implementing it in Synapse to then be able to go and put a legitimate proposal out rather than something which is going to keep changing every couple of minutes. And then other servers like Conduit and Dendrite and Conduit and Grapevine and all the other Conduit forks out there can also hopefully get involved and implement it too. It's pretty exciting. The only things left on it right now that I'm aware of is when you subscribe to a room, which basically says, hey, here is a set of rooms I'm particularly interested in. It should give you the last however many messages of scroll back in the rooms. It doesn't yet, which means that some of the UX and element X is a bit wobbly. It also doesn't know about tags, which is a problem if you are implementing it in a web client like Element Web. And the performance has not been tuned yet, which is why it's pretty exciting that it's completely usable as it stands right now. This is before the round of performance work that Eric Eastwood is doing lands. So watch this space. It's definitely not ready for everybody to suddenly turn it on quite yet, but we're getting there. Then one of the other main pillars of Matrix 2.0 is native OIDC. So Contin went and wrote an amazing wall of text, if not 3 walls of text, in the Twim room. In fact, week before last, I went and cheekily twimmed it this week so that hopefully you can read it in this week in Matrix. But it was an excellent analysis of why we want to move from Matrix's homegrown and slightly suboptimal authentication technology to using an industry standard like OpenID Connect. This has nothing to do with single sign-on. This has nothing to do with centralizing authentication or delegating it to Google or Facebook or Twitter or whoever. Instead, this is simply saying the Matrix spec should not be a quarter of it dedicated to inventing authentication APIs when there is already a non-profit foundation called the OIDC Foundation, who specialize in very well audited and very well understood APIs, which basically provide the same functionality and more, and will allow us to plug in two-factor auth and multi-factor auth and hardware tokens and passkeys and all the other authentication things which people might ever need without having to bloat Matrix and the Matrix spec on your Matrix home server and client for that matter in order to implement it. So go read that. Meanwhile, Matrix Authentication Service, which is the actual OIDC server implementation that Compton and the author team have been working away on for a couple of years now, is getting ready for its grand debut. There is a release called 0.10, I believe, due any minute now. There is a release candidate out last week for it. The release has got a lot of new features because this is the big one where MAS, as we call it, or MAS perhaps, is set up to operate without an upstream identity provider. So far, it's basically been a shim that handles the authentication for Synapse or whatever home server you might have, although it's only integrated so far with Synapse, and then delegates to Keycloak or some other upstream identity instance in order to actually handle authentication. Whereas what happens if you just want to have a bare bones OpenID Connect IDP with the same sort of feature set that you get today in Synapse? Well, that is the stuff that has all just landed in MAS. So Inel, for instance, supports reCAPTCHA, it supports account recovery by email, password changes, rate limitation to avoid people attacking it, password complexity requirements, and a whole new admin interface, an admin API, to kind of match the one that is disappearing on the old auth on Synapse. So I'm slightly preempting the big release announcement for that, which I imagine will happen on Monday now. But it's exciting to see MAS coming into its own, so that if you are just running a random home server and you don't have any existing OpenID Connect infrastructure, you can just run little old MAS and it will handle it for you, giving you the same features that you had previously in Synapse. What remains? I think it's mainly polishing, and I think guest access needs to be solved, or deprecated, or put in some kind of optional bracket. Then the MSCs need a once over to check that they actually reflect where things landed as preparation for Matrix 2.0. Then the other big one is Viip, native Matrix Viip. So stability-wise and implementation-wise, we've seen a whole bunch of major steps forwards over the last week. Been using Element Cool as the kind of stalking horse to go and implement all of this. And 0.6 got released Monday, if I remember correctly, which is a complete rewrite of the user interface, as well as benefiting from a lot of the stability work that has been going on in it recently. I had one of my first Matrix RTC calls, native Matrix VoIP calls, when Amandine fed me up earlier today, and she was on Element X, I was on Element Web, and it worked absolutely perfectly, and was a lot of fun to see one's own true Matrix identity being used on both sides, then delegating through to the embedded element call in order to do the actual VoIP heavy lifting, using LiveKit, of course, as a selective forwarding unit for the actual conferencing bit of it. So this is the shape of things to come. The new layout in Element Cool is in some ways simpler than what we had before, but also more reliable and easier to maintain. It's lost some of the features we had, so you can't zoom on tiles anymore for now. However, the intention is to add this all back in before it gets too much more advanced. Another big thing going on is picture-in-picture on mobile. So Element Call has also been set up so that when embedded in something like Element X on both iOS and Android, if you move away from the call onto a different app or into a different bit of the Matrix client, you can still keep participating in the call and have all of the fancy stuff like CallKit on iOS and whatever Nerf Android calls the Android equivalent of CallKit on Android, so that it really does feel like a proper native call, even if in the end we're cheating and it's a WebRTC web app that does the heavy lifting. So this is very exciting to see Element Cool and all the Matrix RTC stuff come of age. Now the big elephant in the room are the MSCs, because as long-term Matrix RTC followers will know, we have gone through a lot of iteration of different architectures, going from full mesh, going to the waterfall or SFU to SFU implementation, going through to LiveKit, going to shared keys in standalone web apps, going to sender keys in embedded web apps. And right now, the way it works for end-to-end encryption is that when you embed element call into a Matrix client, it does have end-to-end encryption, and it does it using sender keys, which means that each sending device has its own unique encryption key, a bit like a megohm key that is used for the media in that sort of sequence, and it ratchets forwards as you would expect. However, at the moment, we put those keys in the room as a message, which is not ideal from a forward secrecy perspective. They really should be ephemeral. So I think one of the final changes that we're looking at doing is to switch to sending sender keys over to device messages, actually specify that in MSCs, go through the whole MSC stack, tidying it up, and again aiming to get it such that it matches the stable implementation, and that we basically believe this will be good for FCP for Matrix 2.0 in the near future. So that is where the endgame is looking for our brave new world of Matrix 2.0, the attempt to build a protocol that is more than fit for purpose to challenge the centralized incumbents and really build on everything that we've learnt in the last 10 years of going and creating Matrix. Other stuff going on this week. Josh put out a great blog post about the concept of Matrix core projects, where, I mean, the context here is that as Element announced that they were shifting the license of Synapse to AGPL and developing it under the Element umbrella rather than continuing to donate to the Matrix Foundation as Apache back in December, and then went through with it. There are a bunch of other back-end projects that also were announced at the same time, but never got actually relicensed. That is finally happening probably early next week. And so in advance of that, thought it would make sense to put out a statement from the Foundation making clear that there are a set of projects like the spec and the test suites and the SDKs and the dosmats and other libraries which are super important for the entire ecosystem and are dependencies of many, many other projects. And the last thing anybody would want is for suddenly them to switch license from Apache to AGPL or something, because obviously it would cause the application that builds on top to then also have to switch license too. Well, nobody wants that to happen, and for these really important libraries, we wanted to basically make a statement to say, look, even if the contributors were unable to keep contributing, assuming that the Foundation has enough funds, then the Foundation would proactively protect and continue to publish those projects as the Foundation, no matter whatever drama is happening elsewhere in the ecosystem. So hopefully this was reassuring. It was also a great opportunity to work with the governing board in earnest for the first time, because we ran the blog post past the governing board, as it's precisely the sort of governance issue that they exist to weigh in on. And the blog post basically got rewritten based on the feedback from the board, which is much appreciated. Exciting to see our brave new world of open governance really coming to life. What else is there to say? Probably the other interesting thing to talk about that's on my mind topically today is that there is a chance that the linearized matrix stuff might be coming back to life in some incarnation. There is a stream of work where folks are interested in what would happen if Matrix was completely leveraging MLS, not just for encryption, but also for group membership. Because one of the holes that Matrix has today is the lack of cryptographically constrained group membership, something that the Royal Holloway University lecturers highlighted a few years ago when they did the formal analysis on Matrix's encryption model. And whilst we have a proposal for solving it, which I think is MSC 3914 from memory, I've probably got that wrong, let me just check. Constrained 3917, off by 3. Either way, we have MSC 3917 as a proposal of how you can basically sign your invites and your membership events in such a way that you can make sure that the only people who get into your room are the people who should be in that room, rather than having a server spoof an invite or something in order to sneak somebody into a room unbeknownst. However, it does have some limitations. You basically would have to run state resolution on the client in order to make sure that it comes to the right guaranteed conclusion, at which point, what if you were using MLS or DMLS to ensure the membership of the cryptographic group of devices participating in a conversation. So no guarantees yet, but it's something that's come back on the radar quite recently, and it will be interesting to see if we pick up the linearized matrix test jig and code from last year and have more of a play to see what that dialective matrix might look like. Might even end up being a matrix 3.0. Who knows? Anyway, I think that's all I've got to monologue about. Sorry for blathering away. Hope it was interesting, and hope you have a fantastic weekend when you get there. Thanks for flying Matrix. Bye.